Amazing. So we're here on the bite-sized group coaching call, and today we have an amazing topic. But I always like to start out these calls just kind of for anybody that is new watching this call, a little bit about who I am and what I do, and then we'll hop into the topic for today. So I could tell you all about the certifications that I have, my experience, all the years that I spent coaching people. But I think what's really important is, who am I really? And I am someone that used to absolutely hate vegetables. My parents offered me $500 to eat a salad when I was a kid, and I refused. I consider myself to be a motivator and a realist at the same time. So when I motivate someone, it is not about telling you that you can reach a goal that is actually unattainable. It is about helping you see the real way to achieve the things that you want to achieve in life, and help you understand both the difficult part and the part that's going to be easy, right? Because when we look at achieving goals, sometimes people paint this as like, I'm going to help you, lose 10 kilos and it's going to be amazing and it's going to be easy. No, sometimes it's going to be hard. Sometimes you're going to feel frustrated. Sometimes you're going to do things that you're not necessarily proud of, but part of that is understanding how to continue on even when things get tough. And that is what I am all about. I am also that person that is constantly quoting, oh, I heard this on a podcast. I spend a lot of time walking my dog, and so I spend a lot of time listening to podcasts while I do that. I'm also pretty against extremes. So that is extreme diets, extreme workouts, extreme thinkers. Really not my jam. I am all about moderation, and that is moderation in the way that you think. That is moderation in the way that you exercise, moderation in the way that you eat. And I think that it can be really hard to find this moderation, which you might also want to call balance. It can be hard to find, but it's really worth it because it feels good. And I truly believe that the way to achieve your healthiest self is through habit change. It's not through a diet. It's not through a crazy workout plan. It's not through restricting yourself. It is through looking at your habits and finding out the best way for you to change those for the long term. And just a little bit of background and kind of my trajectory. So this is me in college, drank a lot, did not pay attention to what I ate at all. I used to eat Starbucks coffee cake for like 2 meals a day, and I thought that was totally fine. Then I became an athlete, and I was competing in weightlifting. I was competing in CrossFit, and I was absolutely obsessed with weighing and measuring everything I ate. I didn't go out to eat with my friends because I was worried that I wouldn't be able to track the calories accurately. And so while you may look and be like, wow, she was in such great shape, I hated my body. I weighed myself 4 times a day and I was not happy. So everyone out there that thinks that abs are the path to happiness, not the case. Now I eat pretty balanced. I eat pretty healthy, lots of veggies. I eat lots of lean protein. I eat foods that make me happy. I eat chocolate probably once a day. I have a cookie when I feel like it. I don't know what I weigh. And you know what? It doesn't really matter. And surprisingly, I actually like my body a lot more now than I did when my body fat was a lot lower. Not to mention, when my body fat was lower, I completely lost my period. My hair was falling out. I was tired all the time. So I truly believe now that I've been able to find a balance that I feel good at and is actually very sustainable for me in the long run. So this is the question for today. Do you do it right or not at all? And this is because the topic that we are going to talk about today is all or nothing thinking. And this is this thought that comes into your head that's like, okay, this week I'm going to be on track. I'm going to do so well. And then what happens? Wednesday rolls around and, oh, I forgot my healthy snack. Well, might as well, going to ruin it all. Might as well just forget about it. And then Thursday rolls into Friday, rolls into the weekend. Next thing you know, you're having to start over again. Or it's the, well, I don't have the full hour to do my workout, so I'm just not even going to bother. And this is all or nothing thinking. This is like, oh, I do it perfectly, which doesn't really exist, or I don't even bother. And this is what happens that creates this problem where we don't stay consistent in what we're doing because we're thinking that we either need to be perfect or it's not worth doing. So we're going to talk a little bit more about that today. So we're going to talk about what is the all or nothing mindset, your reality versus your perception, the real reason why you struggle to stay on track, some action steps, and how to start shifting your mindset. And so the all or nothing mindset is also called black and white thinking. And it's a really common cognitive distortion. So that's really, when we're talking about cognitive distortions, it's essentially a way of thinking that is distorted from reality. So it's thinking in absolutes. It's thinking in, black or white, like this is good and this is bad. There's a lack of self-compassion because you believe that you need to act in a certain way for you to be worthy, for you to be successful. And anytime you fall short of that extremely high standard, you essentially give up. And the all or nothing mindset makes it really hard to just be good enough because you've either done it perfectly well or you haven't done it at all. And so that's why it's so hard to find this level of balance, to find this level of consistency when you have this all or nothing mindset, is because you're constantly pressuring yourself to do more or to be better, but the expectation that you have is not based in your reality. Here's an example. I was so good this week and the scale didn't move at all. This is never going to work. How often have you tried something for a week, tried something for a month, and when it doesn't go as fast as you want it to, or when things get stressful at work, or you go on vacation, or something happens, it's like, oh, well, this is never going to work. And the whole thing that gets thrown out the window. Whereas potentially what you could do is look at, hey, some of these things aren't working. Some of these things are. I'm going to maybe ditch the things that aren't working for me, and I'm going to keep the things that are. But this isn't generally what we do, right? We say, well, I'm either going to go all in or I'm just not going to do it. I don't have enough time for a good workout, so I'm just going to skip it. This is like what I talked about before. I hear this all the time where it's like, well, I didn't have time to go to the gym, so I just didn't do my workout. And this is where we want to start thinking, and we'll go into this a little bit later on, is like something is always better than nothing, right? But when we're stuck in a black and white way of thinking, or we're stuck in this all or nothing mindset, nothing is ever good enough. And so you do your whole workout, but oh, I could have gone harder, or oh, I didn't burn enough calories. But what if we shifted that to, hey, even if I just do 10 minutes, 10 minutes is better than no minutes, right? That would be shifting out of that all or nothing mindset. And I want to talk a little bit about your perception of what is true and your reality of what is true. And this is where we can really start to break down like, hey, this is a story that I'm telling myself. And then this is like the rational explanation behind what I'm feeling or what I'm thinking. And so perception is, I better eat healthy all week long or I'm never going to lose the weight. I'm just going to try super hard to stay on track this week. And then you think, well, yeah, because last week was a total disaster. There's a couple cognitive distortions happening here, and we're going to talk about this when we talk about the reality. The first one I want to touch on is last week was a disaster. And I hear this from my clients sometimes. I actually just had this conversation with a client the other day. And I was like, hey, and on our inner session, I was like, hey, I noticed in your check-in that you mentioned that last week was a disaster. And I'd like to understand a little bit more about why you say that. And she said, well, I didn't plan out my meals and it was just really hard and I didn't do any workouts. And I just had a hectic week. And I was like, okay, so it sounds like last week was hard. What was good about last week? And she was like, well, I'm really proud of myself because I was eating more mindfully. So I was definitely chewing my food better. I'm proud of myself because I had fruit for a snack instead of, I don't remember what it was that was kind of her other option. She's like, and I'm also proud of myself because even though I didn't work out, I got in a lot of steps. And so I feel like I was moving quite a lot. And so once we framed it that way, I was like, so last week wasn't a disaster at all. Last week, just in your mind, wasn't perfect. So that's why you think it was a disaster. And so this is where your perception, and this is also like when I work with someone either in a group or one-on-one, we work on, hey, like this is what your perception of what you should be doing is, and let's shift that to the reality of what's actually happening and what we actually want to happen. And so going into the reality of that and then kind of looking at, so in the perception, I better eat healthy all week or I'm never going to lose the weight, just going to try super hard to stay on track. And I want to point out this, I'm just going to try super hard to stay on track. There is no plan in trying, right? There's no action plan and there's no thinking ahead. It's just, well, I'm going to cross my fingers and hope that my willpower holds out and it's, I'm just going to do it because I'm a person that does things. The reality is, okay, if I actually look at what my reality is, I have a busy week ahead and I know that my pattern is, Usually by Thursday, I feel kind of exhausted and I don't feel like cooking. So then a realistic way to think about that is, now what can I do to keep myself from falling into old patterns? So in a way, you are, one, recognizing your real patterns. Two, you're also being more compassionate, recognizing that you have a busy week ahead. And three, you're thinking action oriented. You're not thinking about, oh, well, I'm just going to cross my fingers and it's going to happen. You're actually setting yourself up now to create a realistic plan that's going to help you find that balance, right? And so moving on to, like, I want to show you the difference between all or nothing thinking and the way that you can think. And then Silvana, if you want to hop into the chat, if you have any question that's come up from anything that I've talked about yet, just hop into the chat and type that in there. If not, at the end, we'll definitely go through questions. And so with all or nothing thinking, you don't value the small progresses, right? You're thinking, oh, well, my goal is to lose 10 kilos. And, this week I only lost, 300 grams. So I'm a failure. But really, like, in order to lose 10 kilos, you have to lose 300 grams. And you can't just jump from 0 to 10, right? And so with all or nothing thinking, we tend to not recognize the good things that we do because in our heads, they're too small. They're not worth it, right? And that means that you're being overly critical of yourself. Nothing is ever good enough. You're not taking into consideration what's realistic for you. You're taking into consideration the perception of what you feel like you should be doing. And this is when we go into, and I think actually later in this presentation, I talk a little bit about language. And if I don't, I'll definitely revisit that. It's also irrational. It's not taking into consideration the reality of your situation. It's impatient. It doesn't, all or nothing thinking doesn't give you the time to actually realistically reach a goal. I can't tell you how many times I've talked to a client where they're like, well, I'm really disappointed because I thought I'd be losing weight faster. And I was like, okay, how many kilos or how much weight per week do you think that you should be losing? Oh, well, I thought I'd lose a couple kilos a week. And I need to kind of reset that expectation where it's like, that is not a healthy rate of weight loss. And if that has happened in the past, that's probably an indicator of why the rebound was as grave as it was, because losing 2 to 3 kilos in a week is not a rate of fat loss. You can lose 2 to 3 kilos in water weight. You can chop off a bunch of hair. You can chop off a hand, lose 2 or 3 kilos that way, but you're not going to be losing 2 or 3 kilos of body weight or of body fat in a week. And so often all or nothing thinking comes from this impatient expectation that we have of, this should be happening faster, right? It's also motivating you through fear. All or nothing thinking is saying like, well, I better do this, otherwise this horribly drastic thing is going to happen. Like, I better eat this way or this bad thing is going to happen. It's dichotomous thinking. It's, this is good, this is bad. Pizza's bad, celery is good. And there's no context. You're not taking into consideration like, hey, I'm really struggling with this thing because life is also stressful. And we're not, and it's not taking into consideration your life as a holistic experience. It's just taking into consideration like, oh, I need to be going to the gym 5 days per week. And if I don't do that, I'm never going to reach my goals, or I'm never going to progress, or, I'm not a fit person. And all or nothing thinking doesn't take into consideration the context of how you're feeling emotionally, the other stressors that you have in your life. And so this is where we want to start shifting that. And we want to start shifting it towards self-compassion. And anybody that's watching this right now, if you've heard me talk or if you've seen anything on my Instagram or any of my emails, you know how important self-compassion is in the process that I work on with my clients. And this is valuing all progress, no matter how small, taking into consideration context. So being compassionate with yourself, for example, in the perception versus reality example that I gave before, understanding like, hey, if I have a really busy week coming up, I want to be compassionate with myself. I want to maybe plan ahead and know like, hey, Thursday night, I know I'm going to be stressed out. I'm not going to want to cook. So maybe I'll think ahead and order something healthier in, or maybe I'll make extra food. But even if I don't have a chance to cook a healthy meal, I'll be compassionate with myself because I know that even if I maybe order in and have something that isn't on the healthiest side, I know that the next day I can wake up and have my healthy breakfast, and that's fine. And that is part of being consistent. Self-compassion looks for improvements. It doesn't look for perfection. So this is improvement not just in, the what we're doing, but also in the how we're doing it. And so this is something I work on so much with my clients is the what is important, but you already know that it's important to eat vegetables and eat lean proteins and drink enough water. But what's holding you back most of the time is how you're doing it. And so we look at improvements in how you're managing stress, how you're speaking to yourself, how you manage setbacks. All of that has to do with how compassionate you're being with yourself. And self-compassion is about being patient and about being understanding. So just like you would be patient and understanding with your best friend when they're struggling with something, it's treating yourself in the same way. And similarly, it's motivating. When has anyone ever motivated themselves by telling themselves that they are worthless, they're not going to achieve anything, that their efforts aren't worth anything? That's not motivating. I use this example all the time with my clients, and this is if you're talking to your partner and you want your partner to wash the dishes, are you going to tell your partner, like, hey, stupid, get off your ass, you're so lazy, go wash those dishes? No, because that's not going to work. That's going to cause a rift in your relationship. That's going to cause huge communication issues, and your boyfriend's probably, your partner is probably not going to do what you asked him to do. On the other hand, if you say, hey, I know you've had a really long day and we're both super tired. It would be so helpful for me if you would wash the dishes. That would be really amazing. I would appreciate it so much. Which one do you think is more likely? But when we're talking to ourselves, we don't seem to keep that in mind. And so this is where working on self-compassion is really key towards getting rid of that all or nothing mentality. And so I want to move into reframing a common thought, because I think that this is such an important skill when we're working on understanding how to start adjusting our all or nothing thinking, right? So I already ruined today, so I might as well order takeout. This is one I've heard this in my groups quite a lot, is like, well, especially on the weekends, like, oh, well, I go out for a big brunch and it's a cheat meal, and then the cheat meal turns into a cheat day, and then that turns into a cheat weekend. First of all, we're going to remove the word cheat from our vocabulary. We're just going to take it and throw it out, because you are not cheating on anything. This is food. This is not, you're not in a relationship with your food. You don't have a committed, you're not committed to eating, cucumbers every day. So cheating is not going to be in our vocabularies anymore, right? Cheating is a bad thing, and eating what I like to call fun foods is not necessarily a bad thing. So we often have this thought when we overindulge, maybe eat too much or eat foods that we deem bad, say, I already ruined today, so I might as well, the rest of the day doesn't matter. And so we're going to reframe this thought, and we're going to look at what is your perception, which is this, and we want to move into what the reality is. And so this is what a more self-compassionate way of viewing this situation would be. I really enjoyed that lunch I had today, but it was really low, definitely low on veggies. That's okay. I'll have a veggie stir fry for dinner. This is action. I know what action I'm going to do. This is self-compassion. And this is taking into consideration what your reality was. Like, hey, yeah, I had a meal that was maybe a little bit low on vegetables, but no problem. I'm going to take this action to continue to balance out the day. And so this is where we, one, take back control, and two, practice self-compassion. And so the big mindset shift that we want to make here is you don't need to be perfect to see progress. The main goal here is consistency. And consistency is like, yeah, that sounds really simple, but it's actually really hard to practice when you're used to being really self-critical, when you're used to having that all or nothing mindset. And so if you are to take one thing away from this conversation, it's not what you do once in a while, it's what you do all the time that is important. And so when we're looking at the context of our whole life, like back to the phrase we were just reframing, is like, if you're going out to eat once a week, once every couple of weeks, and you have a meal that is not what you would consider to be healthy. It's a, less nutritious meal. That's not what we're worried about. We're worried about what you do day in and day out to eat or act or live in accordance with your goals and values, right? And so, for example, if you're on this call or you're listening to this, you're like, well, my goal is fat loss and I feel like I'm holding myself back. Instead of looking at the Saturday when you go have brunch with your friends, let's look at what are you doing every day and how are you treating yourself every day? And when I say treating yourself, what does that mental talk look like? Are you beating yourself up every time you have a piece of chocolate? Are you mentally restricting yourself so that when you get to the weekend, you're feeling like, oh, I just need to let go because I've been really restrictive all week? Are you focusing on adding in more nutritious foods rather than just restricting foods that you feel like you shouldn't? And this is something that I definitely go into a lot more detail with, with my one-on-one clients. And this is also has a lot to do with context, right? Context of what your life looks like, what your capabilities look like, what you know how to do, what you're ready, willing, and able to do. All of that is really important. But the big mindset shift here is we're looking for progress. We're not looking for perfection. And we want to pay attention to what you're doing all the time, not what you're doing every once in a while. And I want to ask you this question. When has being hard on yourself ever gotten you where you want to be? Has beating yourself up ever really gotten you to where you want to be? And maybe you're like, yeah, no, I had to study for this test. And so I told myself, I was like, hey, idiot, sit down and study for this test. You got to do it. Yeah, you were probably miserable, right? You probably left that studying to the last minute. You probably dreaded it. We don't want to feel that way about our nutrition or about the way we exercise. So 3 really key things. Practice self-reflection. And so that means when something doesn't go the way that you planned, reflect on it. Think back and be like, hey, why did this not go the way that I wanted it to? Were my expectations too high? Was I not being realistic? Was I being too hard on myself? Am I missing tools? Am I missing information? What do I need in order to do this differently the next time? Speak to yourself with kindness and compassion. Speak to yourself. Imagine you are speaking to your best friend when you speak to yourself in your own mind. That is really, really important when we are talking about changing ourselves from being an all or nothing thinker to a more self-compassionate, more rational thinker. And recognize and reframe irrational thoughts. Recognize that you are not your thoughts. You have thoughts. You are not your thoughts. You also are not obliged is the proper English word for that. You are not obliged to act on the thoughts that you have. You can have a thought, recognize that it is an irrational thought, and reframe it into something more rational in order to act on it. So these are 3 really key tips. I would recommend write this stuff down. These are going to be really, really key for breaking through that all or nothing thinking. And then this is my absolute favorite analogy. We are kind of getting towards the end of the presentation here, but the 4 wheels analogy. So if you're driving down the street and you pop a tire, you get a flat tire, are you going to pull over and then slash your other 3 tires because you popped one? And you're probably like, no, that's ridiculous. Why would I ever do that? But when you think about it in the context of being consistent and of all or nothing thinking, you're essentially, every time you tell yourself, well, I already ruined today, so it doesn't matter what I do for the rest of the day, or, oh, well, I didn't have a full hour for my workout, so I'm just not going to work out. You're essentially slashing the other 3 tires, right? Whereas what you can do is simply patch up the first tire and continue along your way, right? Yeah, that wheel definitely has a little damage done to it, but it's nothing that you can't fix and you can still drive the car. So that is one of my favorite analogies because I think that it makes so much sense in how we tend to view our health, our wellness, our nutrition, our fitness, and helping you understand that, one meal, one workout, one bad night of sleep, all of that is not disaster. Even a week of things being hard is not a disaster. It's a blip on the radar of your life, right? And so action steps. Recognize all or nothing thoughts. Ask yourself when you hear those irrational thoughts, what if the opposite were true? Think of what would be good enough in a situation And so important. Remember that something is always better than nothing. Always. I want to invite you to, if you haven't already, sign up for my 5-day mindful eating challenge. I've rebranded it as the mindful eating mini course. I've added some videos, so you'll get a daily video, and it is such an amazing tool. Even if you have worked with me individually or in a group, it is an amazing reminder of just some really simple mindful eating tips that are going to get you focused in the moment that you're eating and really help you understand a little bit better your relationship with food and how you can manage that for the future. And we are on to questions. So I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording here. If you are listening to this recording, watching this recording, go ahead and reply to the email that sent you this recording. If you have any questions, I'm so excited to hear from you and answer those questions. And I hope you enjoyed this. This is one of my favorite topics to talk about. So I hope you enjoyed it.